So 3 stages of our agriculture program I will quickly talk about: innovation, scaling up, and withdrawal. And withdrawal is also important because we can't be getting constant funding. There are 2 programs. One is right here with our approach is in SRI or in our soya program has been that we bring a technology package initially from a research university, from a professor like we have here, and try and adopt it in the farms in a rain-fed condition or irrigated, whatever that may be. And we have several innovations in that. In SRI, we have adopted spacing, we have adopted weeding practices, and we have adopted early identification of disease and therefore prescribing appropriate pesticides to the farmers. In soybean also, those who know soybean sector, they know that mostly it is Madhya Pradesh that comes to your mind when soybean is discussed, then Maharashtra, then Rajasthan in terms of the area under soybean cultivation. We took the package from Madhya Pradesh, where the National Resource or Research Center for Soybean is. Now it's called Directorate on Soybean Research. And we adapted the practice. Again, we worked on spacing, we worked on soil testing, we worked on seed germination, again to test the seed. Otherwise, what you get from Seed Corporation is not necessarily very good. Then we worked on early identification of disease and so on. This part of innovation, this phase of innovation is critical. I'll give you one instance where how it is critical. First of all, any kind of practice you take to the farmer will say, I don't like it. I don't think I want to do it. Once I went to a village in Bundi district in Rajasthan. So my colleague took me to a farm and where the old lady was sitting, and my colleague said, let's go to her farm and look at the status of the farm, state of the farm. And we found, because once we increase the spacing, what happens? Lots of weeds also alongside will grow with the nutrition you are giving. So we said, and I said, we should do weeding, and can I go and ask the old lady to do it? Why is she doing it? It's part of the package. So I went to her and with some translator in between. She said, I'm not going to do it. If you want to do it, you go and do it. So actually, Padam Jain, my colleague, and I actually did the weeding in her farm. So the story basically I am saying is initially there would be a lot of resistance. We may talk about very glibly about innovation, but adoption by the farmers in the first couple of years is a damn difficult task. Those who are used to spacing of 9 inches in soya or 6 inches in rice or no inches in rice, it's all random planting. Why would they agree to some geometric way of doing spacing? And then you need marker and you need all sorts of things, which in the beginning would appear to the farmer and wife and everybody as extra labor, more work. I'm not, and we are not sure, they are not sure of the output. They are not sure of the increase in the yield that will come after 4 months and so on. So first 2 years, here also, in both cases, interestingly, we started with 50 farmers. And today in SRI, we have 3,000 farmers with your support. And in soybean, we have 12,000 farmers. So, but I was saying innovation is very critical in the first 2 years. You don't scale up too fast. We reached 600 farmers here in second year, in soya also. Then before we scale up, I don't want to take too much of your time. What is the tipping point, or use the word, in scale up? When we go to the farmer, all of us are some graduate from some college, so we say we should do so many things because our mind works faster than the adoption. So we had 14 practices in soya, 14 practices including irrigation and so on and so forth. Then with help of some researchers, we did a correlation analysis between input practices and the yields that the farmers were getting. For 670 farmers, or we fed data. And again, somebody was saying, no, we need input from corporate guys. The corporate guys were saying 80-20 formula you should apply. So when we applied that, we found not more than 5 practices you need to adopt to get 80% impact. So from 14, we brought down the practices to 5 practices. Then we said formula is simple, fewer things to tell the farmer, easier to adopt for larger scale, and that is the key thing we did for scaling up. And we were able to reach 3,000 farmers, then 7, and last year 12,000 farmers. So this is one part of the scaling up that we did. Second part of the scaling up was that quality human resources are very costly. A agriculture graduate today would need to be paid no less than 25,000 rupees in Karnataka. What would be the going rate? No less than 25, sometimes even 30,000 rupees seed companies or fertilizer companies might pay. So if you scale up, you need a large army, so that is not possible. So second thing we did was to train local youth in the practices so they could do monitoring and they were paid on task basis. So this is where I think we can motivate young people. They can work very closely. In our case, every sort of this youth works with about 200 to 300 farmers, and they are motivated because, not just because of payment, but because in the villages where they work, they have become respected figures.
So quickly, I focused on Indian agriculture and rural youth. Yes, livelihoods to 67% of the population. Yes, they support livelihoods to 67% of the population. They cannot be absorbed somehow, yeah? Sometimes we have quick fix solutions of taking them somehow from agriculture and absorbing somewhere. That will not happen easily. Majority are smallholders, risk-shy, cotton-fragile ecosystems. Majority rural youth belong to farm families. Disillusion with farm realities, extension system not reaching and guiding them. In many places there is no extension system. Traditional wisdom eroding generation after generation and confused with emerging alternatives provided by most of us. And here I wanted to flag this issue. World is being warned repeatedly. Are we aware? Are we conscious? Are our policy makers looking at them seriously? Because we should not make the same mistakes others made. IISTD study, which is constituted by 400 scientists all over the world, did 3 years research and studied so many contexts and said that business as usual does not work. You cannot wish away small farmers, you cannot wish away fragile ecosystems. They are the backbones of survival for the future of the planet. Oxfam study said, yes, importance of smallholders cannot be ignored. IFAD, as latest as Head to Nations address mentioned about this. And interestingly, we always feel that developed countries are surviving and thriving on industrial agriculture models. They are not. And then new peasantries, a study done by 30-year agriculture studies by Jan Dove in Europe, in Netherlands. Family farming is doing better. Ironically, in the country where this scientist has proven that it doesn't work, today the Queen or some Netherlands, we got a mail from them saying that they are having a meeting to perpetuate industrial agriculture in the Netherlands. So things are not new, they are happening everywhere in the same way. So I just wanted to flag those issues. And United Nations, FAO, climate change induced food crisis they talk about. MS Swaminathan's observations are repeatedly coming in newspapers. He talks about rural youth, he talks about drylands, etc., etc. And everybody has recognized 2014 as an international year of family farming. Are we aware? They are recognizing that it is going to be the future. We cannot ignore them. So in this context, smallholders are relevant for any country, including India, which is primarily agrarian, and many livelihoods are intertwined with it. What AMEF has been doing modestly, I can say, has been promoting ecological agriculture for the last 27 years. We call it low external but sustainable agriculture. We also share knowledge of not just ours, but primarily others' knowledge, like Srijan, BIFE. They are doing excellent work, and many more all over the country and all over the world. A network of magazines shows that agroecological approaches are working, are scalable, are livelihood supporting, are the future. But we seem to be forgetting that they are the future. So what is LISA? Somebody may say low external input sustainable agriculture. Here we talk about productivity improvements through ecological approaches, optimum use of resources and participatory processes. That's very critical. Participation is not a notion like a sherry on an ice cream. It has to happen at every stage, right from the problem identification, choice of alternatives, testing the alternative, finding which alternative works, and deciding what to scale up and when to throw out this NGO. So that can also be there. So it's all, participation should be in that spirit, it should be taken. I'm promoting ecologically sound, economically feasible, and culturally acceptable alternatives. Very often we dump some ideas which may not be acceptable to them because the local people may not find it suitable. And secondly, it may be an equipment given to a woman who is using it. You cannot, the height of the equipment is totally inappropriate. So we make such mistakes, costly mistakes. And as Ved was saying, women farmers and farmer-led innovation is the key. Then what does AME do on the field? It promotes low-cost, low-risk alternative eco-farming practices with small farmers who constitute 70%. And cotton drylands. And alternatives, I said simple, as Ved said again, inexpensive, manageable, people involved, local and experiential. And helps people help themselves through durable learning processes like PTD. We call it participatory technology development, where they identify the problem, prioritize the problems, and evolve an alternative, try out and compare it with an alternative which they have been following, and find that this bloody thing works. So if it works, so we take it. And sometimes we ask the scientists, why the hell it's working? He says, you prove on a scale. We say, we can't prove it on a scale. You just do your research and tell us why the hell it's working. So the agenda can be shifted to your research, where the people can see why the hell it's working. And then farmers' field schools, basically human resource development. AME is not good in institutionalization like Pradhan or Srijan. It's more of human resource development and focuses on farmer groups and rural youth. Here we talk about combination of practices. A dryland farmer has to combine a set of practices, not popularize and scale up one. He has to combine a set of practices for his farm to be sustainable. Hold the rainwater where it falls, improve the fertility which is highly degraded through various methods, mixed cropping, which is the soul of farming. The farmer was very holistic and soulful in seeing that his family needs, food needs, income needs, and nutrition needs, and all are met from the farm. So that's the key. And then using every space for greening so that it can be recycled. And of course, ecologically sensitive system of rice intensification, where the plant is allowed to grow better in conditions which it can thrive. Better air, less water so that it can breathe better. That is the key of and which almost questioned the existing science sometimes. It said that this is the best package of practices. It questioned every package of practice. So it was a bit an alternative or a paradigm shifting alternative. The key to all these things is changing mindsets. It's not easy. When does it happen? If it is experiential, empowering learning processes, because that's what we know and that's what we have been practicing. There may be many other better methods, but I'm talking about what we know and what we have been doing. Training farmer groups, training rural youth. Our learnings have been youth need experience to practice alternatives. They need to experience the benefit, otherwise they are not convinced. They look for a leadership role in communities, in guiding others. If you can trigger off that self-esteem, maybe they stay back in farming. Not only money, income, and also critically self-esteem. Thirdly, aspire to be unique and recognized. Sometimes if you say you are an organic farmer in a chemically intensive farming all around, you stand out. Maybe that's one thing which we found that this youth like. Train them as trainers who are practitioners. They are not staying as a better farmer. They are guiding others. Though they start a movement of alternatives. So when they are perceived as leaders, like our friend here, SRDS, he himself is a fantastic leader. So such people motivate others. Myself and Med may be doing to some extent on the dais, but they will be doing on the field, Manjunath and people like Sangeeta. So, and also Mayacharis and so many people who are working as volunteers and SAPs in our field projects. Okay. Quickly, they need to learn realities through games, articulate concepts in groups, sharing learnings, This is all part of our farmers field school process by which they undergo a season-long learning. They demystify concepts through simple studies, where they study how erosion happens. Any amount of theoretical study will not help them to understand how erosion is happening on their farm. They learn it better. But small but durable steps. Here I would like to say BIFE, Srijan and AME have shown Mary that it is possible if you focus on the human resource development, capacity building, alternatives which are simple to develop. And here I wanted to flag it that scale is sector specific. You cannot apply same models to every sector. And context specific. A cashew nut farmer will not behave like a small farmer. His context is different. His resources access is different. His worldview is different. The people who he approaches and the hand-holding is different. So that's what I mean by constituency. And paradigm shift dependent. When you tell that whatever you have been doing for the last 25 years is wrong, you do it differently, it's a paradigm shift. Whether it's agroecological approaches, LISA or SRI. So it requires a different set of hand-holding. AME's learnings on scaling up from various phases and initiatives. One was ecological alternatives as an answer to the chemical intensive agriculture in the 80s. And we found that several alumni of AME are taking it forward, not AME. Several people undergone that courses are taking it forward in different parts of the South Asia. That's one type of, a movement's become multiple. LISA knowledge sharing through magazines, web, global network, it's people's knowledge, practical experiences. So that's one way of scaling up good ideas, good practices. Field scaling up, what we have learned is through empowering education processes, which we know. And so what we know we is generally project. So this is what we found as a very durable way of creating an interest, capacity, self-esteem, which makes them stay back in farming and pursue farming, which may not be fetching them as much as a very entrepreneurial occupation in the city, but this is where they can earn, where they have been living, where they have grown up, and also help their community. So a sense of belonging to the community. And lastly, forging multi-stakeholder platforms where the agendas of the farmers become the agendas to be addressed by the multi-stakeholders, whether it's a scientist or a department. He says, we don't know why it's working, or what are the types of forward-backward linkages have to be built. I think that's one way of scaling up. And consortia, especially in LISA, we found that LISA magazine, when it had multiple languages, I don't know Oriya, I don't know Kannada, I don't know Kannada much, I don't know Tamil, I don't know Hindi, but they're all being handled by different institutions at different levels. And each partner is finding it as his own movement in communicating LISA. So that's a consortia approach. One way forward, experts worldwide do agree smallholders are important. They are for the livelihoods, food, ecological nutrition, security. Can the vast farming population of this country be a competitive advantage? Why not, in Michael Porter's terms? And can we invest in building their innate abilities instead of disempowering them? So, therefore, ecological agriculture a way forward to deal with food security and climate change, not just for farmers, but for the planet to survive. And in a world where holistic farmer is intimidated by specializations, durable learning happens when guided by his or her peers. And I thank you for your attention.
Only tree-based farming, I thought I will make general statement. You know, when we talk of the scaling up, I think the key element is, to me, forward-backward integration. In the modern world, it is the value chain development. I would like to start with a very small example story, which happened in BIFE. We were never involved in goat. We were only convinced that cattle is the one. Goat also, we are a Gandhian organization, and goat ultimately means mutton, less of milk and more of mutton. Somehow we got into a situation, no less than Mr. Ratan Tata sent a message whether you can do something for the poor women of West Bengal, where the women maintain goats for the puja festival in West Bengal. For the puja, they keep 4 or 5 goats because that is the time, the Vijayadashmi time, they sacrifice. In Hindu, Muslim literature, sacrifice is good, holy. So they maintain for their livelihood. And suddenly, few weeks before the puja starts, marketing, half the animals die, 50% mortality. So one minister from that area, Bardwan, requested Mr. Tata. So Mr. Tata was searching, and we had a small project, and he was asking whether we will do. Then when somebody like Tata tells whether you want to do, this is a great challenge. And I had to convince or keep these trustees hidden that I'm going to get into goat development, because I myself is a vegetarian. When you promote goat, sometimes it touches my heart. Am I doing the right thing or not? But only one justification I thought was that, it's poor women suffering is much more important, their livelihood, than the goat itself. The other thing, so with that conviction, we just really started. And honestly telling, we had also a lot of suspicion. I am a forester by profession. So I was worried, all the time. In my earlier avatar, I said, goat is destroying the ecosystem, so goat should not be developed. So I got into a kind of dilemma as to how do we handle this situation. So I had to design really something which has to be convincing the environmentalists, which will also convince all the vegetarians and the people who believe in, non-violence, but also help the goat keepers of West Bengal. So that was the real story. It happened. So that was in, we never worked in Naxalite affected or in the communist area like West Bengal, but we went all the way from Pune to West Bengal and said, we'll take this as a challenge. First thing, important thing is, when you want to scale up, you must identify the hurdles. What is real need? We need to have need-based program. Just because we have a program, we just simply can't keep on promoting it. We need to, this goat is an example. There was a need. So once you have to understand the need, we must understand what was the problem. So we studied the problem and designed a suitable program. In West Bengal, the problem was there was a disease, very simple. There was a disease called PPR, and that used to affect. And the government did not bother at all. They did not know. The problem with the government is, the poor people's problems don't reach the top people. They are ignored. Imagine the goat. If anybody from goat, West Bengal, koi hai West Bengal say. West Bengal goat means people start salivation. That is so much of, they are fond of meat, goat meat. But they never bothered as to what is the real problem of goat. So we decided, we studied. We made a very simple system. We had a lot of good technology. We had frozen cement technology for goat. We had artificial insemination technology. But when we saw the women who are having small goats, that Black Bengal goat is like a small, big dog, It's only 10, 15 kilograms. So we decided we will not take any good technology necessary. We'll start with working with the capacity of the local people. The technology should be, user-friendly. Otherwise, the technology has no value. So we decided that, we studied. Every lady maintains 3 or 4. And we decided we must give a good male which can serve all the bucks. So we found out that one male can cover 40 to 50 females. So we decided we will have a group of 5 or 6 women with together 40 to 50 female goats and give them one buck. We will give a buck to them so that, they will use this good quality buck. Then we decided what to do with the vaccination. Without the vaccination, there was no way the animals would have survived. We asked the West Bengal government, do you produce vaccine? They said no. I asked Maharashtra government, do you produce vaccine? They said yes, but it will be only for using in the Maharashtra. So I could not use it. They said, you can write a certificate, fake certificate, but I said, why to write fake certificate? Then I came to Karnataka, they said, do you produce vaccine? They said, yes, I can give you 25,000 doses free. I got free 25,000 doses. The cost is only 20 paisa per dose, so that was a very small thing. And once you vaccinate, the goat will maintain immunity for 5 years. That means almost for lifetime. So after that, so we took the whole vaccine. Then I thought, if I go to the government and ask the veterinary department, they would never use that. Because, if they have not done for 60 years after independence, if I send a vaccine, they will never, the ego will come into the, these are all, I'm telling the story, these are all important for scaling up. So I told one IAS officer who was there in the district, I met him, he was telling me, sir, and I said, he's a friend, a nice person. So I told on the telephone, I said, Mr. Raji, can you organize? He said, yes, sir, I will do. So he called all the veterinarians in front of his team. They got vaccinated, all the 25,000 goats in 2 days. and the mortality came down to less than 5% from 50%. Then once we showed, the government became very alert. They brought the vaccine, they started producing, they supplying free. So then we had to monitor the whole thing. Nobody, when a veterinarian, I can't hire a veterinarian. My organization, we have 4,000 people. I had to literally in tears. Even the good veterinarians have already left. Not because he has a passion, but people are in such a demand, veterinarians. So we said, how do we handle? Again, we decided we must have a networking with all the partners. We had a networking with the department because anyway we had to work. We told the veterinarians, can you train some of the local people? And between the men and women, for goat, women were more important because most of the women were the goat keepers were women. So we decided some of the housewives whether you are prepared to be extension agent. They said yes. So we trained them for 15 days. We taught them few things. One is how to give deworming. They never knew deworming jantunashak, So that cost 1 rupee. So we told the lady, you take 2 rupees from everybody, earn 1 rupee for every dose. Vaccine we gave her, we taught her vaccination. For every 20 paisa vaccine, she took 2 rupees. Then, we also told one of the goat keepers to maintain the goat, so charge 5 rupees for service. Incidentally, the awareness is so much today that in Maharashtra, for one service, people are prepared to pay 300 rupees. And we started with 5 rupees. And it takes little time, but it worked. So with that, we started the whole program, and also the eco-friendly. We had to convince the government department, environmentalists, that how it is eco-friendly. So we decided that, we must decide the carrying capacity of the village. And every family should decide that they will not keep more than 7 or 8 goats, so that, the number will not increase, but only the quality will improve. Second thing we said, we don't distribute any female, we only bring better quality male for breeding, so that within the local population, with control, and rigorous, whenever there is excess, they should sell. So with these 4 conditions, we started working. And I tell you, and the last important thing, most important thing is trade. We had to convince the people that, this is all working. Good buck, the male, deworming, vaccination, castration. The ladies also learned how to do castration. And 5 rupees they charge. So with that, the ladies, we gave them initially 500 rupees, but they were able to earn about 1,000 rupees extra from all the services provided. She could go from house to house. We also gave one more condition, that every house, the field guide with the ladies who are trained, we are given 2 females, so that they will learn at home how to really do the best goat management practices. So while earning, they were also becoming experts. So only 2 minutes left. Okay. So I will end up with this goat story next 2 minutes. So with this, in 2 years' time, and they started weighing. As a result, in goat marketing, generally the middleman comes, he holds the bag and says, I'll give you 1,000 rupees. When a trader with a smart guy tells 1,000, the poor lady can only ask, give me 1,500, then they settle for 1,200. Now with that scale, she started weighing, and we also taught them, if the mutton rate is 3,300 rupees a kilo, the live weight should be half of it, 50. So everybody in the 2 years' time, the mortality stopped to 5%. The better growth was there, vaccination was there, castration made better growth of the males. And weighing, the lady said, my goat is now 20 kilos. The market mutton rate is 300, so my rate for this is 150. So my goat is worth 3,000 rupees. Tell how much you are going to give. One information, that fellow could not say anything less than 2,500. Once you know the information, it became completely empowered, the ladies. As a result, in 2 years' time, from 2,000, a family with 2 goats, they were earning 3,000 rupees. They are able to earn now 9,000 rupees. And the goat, the control of the population, the foresters were very happy that there is no damage from the goat. And with this, we were able to rehabilitate 10,000 families. After 3 years, I went with a professor from the faculty, dean from University of Pennsylvania. The ladies were so proud that somebody was saying, look, I earned 30,000 rupees, 25,000 rupees. This is the story. So the point here is, to coming back to that, is what are the important things? The forward-backward integration. I would suggest, if there is any program, we'll put all the players into the whole picture. What are the things required in good input supply, good technology, good, and good training for the people. This is backward integration. And linking to the market. When you talk the market, even if you give me another 25 minutes, I can't handle. So, so the marketing is a most wretched thing, because today farmers are literally cheated. Whether he's illiterate or literate, is literally cheated. For instance, a tomato, I tell you. Tomato, we have the excellent technology to produce 40 tons per acre. But before the tomato is sold to the market, you have to grade only the small tomatoes are gone, all the ripe ones are gone. They have to be, farmer has no patience to even feed to the cattle, he will throw on the road. And once it goes to the market, the weighing, there is a cheating. Then the hamals cheat. Then the traders come and make a cartel. 4 people in the one market can completely ruin the market for the day. So with that, farmer is literally at the mercy of the farmer. So what is important is make sure that we work on a value chain and address all the backward forward integration. Second one is the group. Individual farmer has no capacity, farmer depends on the government can never deliver. So they should have their own, organization. Thirdly, the extension. I have one last point, that, women are the best extension workers. Recently, I have a small proposal given to ICA that, we must identify women champion in the village. There are many outstanding women who have done something in agriculture successfully. Use them as the, agents for extension. Give them training, link them with KVKs, so they are the best champions to promote other women. So with this, I'm sure we should be able to see a great change in the expansion of the activities. Thank you very much.
ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. I think so. I am not so poetic like you in Kannada, only a few words. Anyway, I was just confused for a moment. We should call Dr. Hegde, Dr. Prasad and Dr. Bhatt either my co-panelists or my partners, because I think Dr. Hegde, we have been working with the BAIF for so many years, right from watershed development, and Dr. Prasad and our Lisa as well as the lead crop scheme, etc. Okay. Friends, I think I've been asked to do 2 jobs today. Before that, let me also introduce NABARD, National Bank for Agriculture and Rural Development. And it is a unique hybrid institution anywhere in the world. It is partly a central bank and partly a development bank. So what is a development bank and how it is different from a commercial bank? Very simple. In a development bank, people come first, profit comes next. Correct? Now, last 3 decades of understanding as a development banker, tipping, scaling up and mainstreaming has 4 P's. First P is the passion, which talks a lot about the champion who is actually, mainstreaming it, steering it. Second important P is paradigm shift, which Mr. Prasad also was talking about. Now, without passion, may I ask your name? Yeah. Father's name? Grandfather's name? Great father's name? Okay. Sankita, what's your name? Of course, I'm asking your name. Mother's name? Grandmother's name? Great grandmother's name? Okay. So, none of us remember, I think, okay, more than 4 to 5 generations, okay? Right? But I'm sure, we work so hard to earn property, to earn this, to earn that. When the fact is that after 4th generation, your great grandson will not remember your name. Correct? Okay. But I can tell you, with passion, we can create legends. I think Dr. Narayan Reddy is one example. Okay. And Dr. Manubhai Desai and Dr. Hegde are another examples. Okay. what I'm saying is, their names will not be forgotten in the history in the near future. Now, coming to my, so this is the passion. Second is the paradigm shift. I was reminded of a small story. We get conditioned by certain, I can relate it with the SHG Bangle Engage program, which NABARD had steered up. Okay. See, this is the largest microfinance program in the world today, covering crores of families. How did the paradigm shift happen? What is a paradigm shift? I can give a small anecdote. Being the last speaker, Mr. Bhatt, you can give me a few minutes extra. Okay. No. There was a British traveler who went into an inn, he went into a hotel and asked for a room. He was given a nice room. And he asked the hostess, I want breakfast. Sir, what do you need? What do you want for breakfast? I want bread toast. Okay. So it should be slightly brown or no. I want a totally darkened, totally carbonized bread. She said, nobody eats like this. You cannot eat this. No. I want that only. Totally carbonized bread. Okay. She had no other alternative, but she had served him carbonized bread, totally carbonized. Then he said, Madam, stand by me. Sit by me, by my side, and start shouting at me. Start calling me names. How can I do? You are my esteemed guest. Unless you start shouting at me, I am not going to pay your hotel bill. Okay, she has no other go. He started calling him names. Okay. Then he had a very nice breakfast. After that, she asked him, Sir, I have never come across such a strange, guest. Can you tell me, your behavior looks very odd. Why it is so strange? Is it? This traveler said, Madam, there's nothing strange with this. This is what happens in my house every day. Okay. So, the conditioning for the last 30 years, you talk to any banker, poor people are not bankable. You talk to any, people, poor people, they say, bankers are not approachable. This is the conditioning which has happened last 30 years from IRDP days. So, we have to break this out, okay? We started a pilot, SHG Bangle Engage program, and we have shown the bankers that poor people are the most bankable segment of the people. Even Birlas, they will get you credit at 5%, and corporates, they give a recovery rate of only 80%. These people give you 100% repayment time, on time, at the market rate. Okay, we have proven. That is why this has become successful. Okay, so paradigm shift is another important, scaling tip. Third is about the people. People, I mean, not only the NGO sector, forming alliances, mobilizing people with the NGO, with the banks, with the government organizations like the veterinary institutions, okay, forming alliances and mobilizing people and preparing the people even at the community level. Mr. Prasad was talking about, organizing youth, organizing animators, local animators, it is very, very important. So, preparing the people, forming alliances is another part. Fourth P, which I think is equally important, last but not the least, is the paisa. Finally, everyone needs paisa to upscale, correct? That is where bankers and NABARD, come to your help. Having said this, I think I can, when I was talking about the partnership, there is a specific task given to me on the mainstreaming of certain experiments for higher agriculture productivity. Probably 3-4 things I can tell you. The SRI, where NABARD has partnership with AME Foundation, with SKDRDP, with Srijan, with your organization also in a small way. The largest partnership with SKRDP. Now, I'm thinking, actually I'm traveling. Now after, there is an inspection going on. After that, I will go for in the evening, morning I'll be addressing them. There's a UPNR, Dr. Virendra Hegde is also joining us. So, 30,000 farmers have been covered in 8 districts and 30% increase in the paddy, paddy yield, 20% reduction in the cost. This is very well documented, both by SKRDP and also by Srijan, very well documented. We have an ongoing experiment with, pilots with AMA Foundation, what is called augmenting agriculture productivity through lead crops, ragi, maize, etc. This has also been very well documented. There is 40% increase in yield, even by small techniques like seed replacement, farmers' field schools. Very, very simple things. Okay, it's possible. Correct. One more experiment, which is of one more partnership I would like to mention is the low-cost water harvesting. I don't know whether Sikandar is here, but Sikandar is here. Okay, where we have, he's one of the top 5 finalists in the Rural Innovation Fund. Rural Innovation Fund. Okay. He has been able to bring quality water in dryland areas, and who is also a Deshpande Foundation, beneficiary. And the largest partnership, probably to my extent, is with the BAIF. Sir, you may know EGDESAP, the WDF, Watershed Development Fund, and Tribal Development Fund, that the WADI approach, has been documented as one of the most impactful in the entire world. I think GIZ has come out with a very good, which is impacting millions of people, thanks to the partnership with BAIF and other state governments. Now, certain lessons, some more tips I had in mind is, I think our working with BAIF very closely with BAIF and WDF, I think the secret of any sustainable scaling is community ownership. Unless community is convinced, unless community is managed, community takes over the management, it is not going to be sustainable. Okay, right? That is the first point. I think all of us will agree. Number one. Number two is, from NABARD own side, there should be some dedicated units, like our own project management units in WDF and TDF has made miracles. The officer is able to, my district development officer will have different sets of tasks to do. He is not dedicated to a particular, this thing. I'm happy to note, some of the PMUs which have been established after the WDF, they have been performing very, very well. I must also share with you, yesterday I was just saying most of you must have seen the Times, awards, Social Impact Awards. I think out of the awardees, 6 awardees had partnership with NABARD in some, like from Dawn Foundation, FES, etc. Okay. So we were all very happy that our own partners are getting, very good this thing. Okay. In fact, I can tell you one small example from 2 minutes. Okay. So I was a small example from Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand. We had a tribal, formed a producers collective called Masuta, for which Central Sericulture Board has been awarded the Times, Impact Award. See, the Masuta, all tribals, all illiterate tribals, tribal women formed a society, producer collectives, which will give value addition to Tassa silk, right from production to Tassa silk. Okay. It is on marginal lands. It has been funded under UPNRM. And I asked the, chairperson of the producers organization. It is managed by one MD. He is on deputation with Pradhan. He is a MS Agriculture with MBA background. I asked her, okay, so what is the difference between MD and president? Who is more powerful? This illiterate tribal lady said, I can sack him. Okay. This is the kind of empowerment, that has been brought about by POD, producers organization, the collectives, the collective power of the collectives, producers organizations. Now, having said this, there is one more assignment which Neelam and they were given is how we can upscale some of this proven method to scale with NABARD assistance. I can tell you, NABARD, this is the only institution in the country which plows 50 to 60% of its annual profit to CSR. Okay. Entire fund, around 800, 900 crores, it goes to either WDF, TDF, promotional funds, etc. There are a few funds with all of you can take, all of us can take advantage, is the Rural Innovation Fund. of which Mr. Sikand is also one of the beneficiary. WDF TDF, where many of the partners are with us. Farmers Technology Transfer Fund, on which we can also assist you, like farmers, field schools, etc. PODF, the Producers Organization Development Fund, we have created a new fund on which concessional funds without much collateral, it is a collateral-free lending can also be given. And UPNRM, Umbrella Program Natural Resource Management, which is a program-based, support for all NGOs on community-managed livelihoods, which are based on strong natural resource management principles. Okay, these are all certain things we can take. Apart from this, of course, we are also extending a large amount of refinance to banks, which will come to the to the farmers. It is about 75,000 crores every year in the form of credit to timely credit to through Kisan credit cards, etc., etc. I think the way forward, to my mind, I find scaling up is also very much influenced by the quality of the staff that the NGO system has. Okay, we are talking about attrition rate in and they are also dependent upon they are also facing a lot of financial uncertainties. Correct? Okay. So how to deal with this? I was just thinking about it. I think there is a need to shift from a project-based approach to program-based approach. We should have a larger MOU. Okay, I will work with NABARD or whoever is the donor will work with this region or BIF or AME on a broad canvas of this thing over 5 years with a certain impact indicators, 1, 2, 3, 4, on a mutually accepted indicators. There is one way forward. Second way is, I think among all the most scarce resources, skilled manpower is a very scarce resource. When World Bank is thinking of young professional program, NABARD or any other donor institution can think of young professional program where these people can be recruited from the market, from premier institutions, okay, from technical institutions, sociology institutions, and management institutes. They can be placed with this NGOs for some time on a contract basis, so that the best talent is also attracted and available to the NGO sector. I think third view I have is the champion, okay, passion, the attitude to say never say die. But dealing with Indian banks, everyone will, close to death. This is my own experience. Okay, so I think the innovator or the champion needs some kind of a financial assistance during the incubation period on a sustained basis. I think these are the three, probably I think the seminar or the conference can recommend as the way forward. Thank you very much for the opportunity.